Hi there, this video will show you how to make Sheath animation mods in Elden Ring. Simply put, Sheath animation mods are mods where you pack NPC parts into weapons, such as the Death Knight's cape and wings you are seeing here. You can also pack animations in, such as the flapping wings here. Please note that this tutorial is of medium difficulty, and if you haven't made a mod before, you may find it difficult to follow. This tutorial is a bit long, and you might want to increase the play speed. I would like to give my special thanks to the followings before we start. The theory behind this kind of mod is that each weapon in Elden Ring should be able to support up to 4 models inside. Since a vanilla weapon usually doesn't have more than 2 models, we could leverage the redundancy for modding. There are 3 steps for the modding workflow: model processing, dummy poly processing, and animation processing. Step 1 is to process the NPC's model and keep only the parts that we want, such as wings. Step 2 is to process the player's dummy polys and bind the NPC to one of them. This is to make sure the NPC's position and orientation are both correct. Step 3 is to process the NPC's animation to resize it to match the player's size. We can also edit the animation as required, such as remove the root bone movement to make sure the NPC stays stationary relative to the player. Let's talk a bit about cloth physics and animation here. For cloth physics, you could simply take them as auto-computed physics, meaning that they are not pre-baked and are computed by the game in real time. From Software usually use 2 types of cloth physics. Vertex-driven cloth physics are commonly found on simple meshes such as capes. Cloth bone-driven cloth physics are commonly found on complex meshes such as long skirts. One of this would be the Heretic Sorcerer set in Night Rain, which is a set that we could leverage for long skirts and china dresses. Once we have completed step 1 and 2 from the workflow, we should be able to port the cloth physics. These are the main tools for Sheath animation modding. Pause and have a look if you need to. I will soon start a demonstration, and in this demonstration, I will show you how to port the wings of the Deathrite bird into the Death Poker, and I will edit the idle animation of the bird to resize the wings. So for step 1, these are what I'm going to do. I will start by editing the bird's model, keeping only the wings and the accessories on them. I will then create a new aniband.dcx file, and then I will pack the bird's textures, wings, skeleton, animation, and its files for cloth physics into the Death Poker. Let's start the demo. Firstly, these are the files that we need. This is the Death Poker. This is the Deathrite bird. This is the Deathrite bird's textures. These 3 are the bird's animation files. We will extract the skeleton and the idle animation out of these 3 to make a new AniBND file and pack it into the Death Poker. Let's start with the easiest, which is to pack the bird's textures into the weapon. For convenience, let's unpack all the DCX files first, and then let's go into the Death Poker on the left and the Deathrite bird on the right, and then unpack the TPF files. In theory, the best practice would be to find out which textures are needed from the bird and only pack those into the Death Poker. But I am going to pack all textures into the weapon because that's more convenient, and the only drawback is that the file is going to get bigger by like 14 megabytes.
And then we need to edit the Death Poker's XML file to register all these new textures. What we need to do is to copy the lines between the textures tags in the XML for the bird into the XML for the Death Poker, and then save it. After that, go back to the Death Pokers folder and pack up the TPF, and then the textures are ported. And then we need to edit the model of the bird. Let's open this FLVER file. And then while in the viewer, press F1 to change the view so that it's easier to identify the meshes for later operations. Now, click the Mesh button. Now, the most important thing, check the Delete Face Set Only checkbox to make sure we can preserve the cloth physics when deleting meshes. If you don't check this, you will lose all cloth physics when deleting meshes. Then select All for Delete, firstly for convenience, and then check every mesh to keep those that are needed. Uncheck the deletes for those meshes that we are going to need. Click Modify to delete the unwanted meshes. And then we need to remove the masks in Material. Otherwise the model may not show in-game. To do that, delete all the meshes and then click Modify. And then click Modify again to make sure everything is saved, and then we can close Fulver Editor. Let's go back into the Death Pokers folder and then copy the C48889 CLM2, the C48890.f Fulver, and the C489C.hkx files into it. The C48890.CLM2 file and the C489CLM.hkx file are both for cloth physics. Now we need to create a new AniBND file for the Death Poker using the skeleton and animation of the Deathrite bird. Let's go into the folder for the first animation file of the bird and copy the skeleton. Then paste it into a convenient place for later processing. And then let's go into the second animation file of the bird and copy the compendium file and the first HKEX file. We will use these three files to make the new AniBND file later. Now let's go back to the Death Pokers folder and carry out some renaming, following the naming convention of Elden Ring. You don't need to do this if you don't want to. As long as the file names are not in conflict with Elden Ring's own files, you should be fine. Now let's make a new folder in preparation for the new AniBND file. You can call this folder whatever you like. Now let's copy the three animation-related files across. Again, I am gonna rename these, and again, as long as the file names do not conflict with Elden Ring's own files, you can call them whatever you like. Now we need to write a XML for packing. To save time, I will show you one that works, and you can pause to copy it down if you want to. The only things that you need to pay attention to are the IDs. They must be 1000 for the skeleton, and 7000 for the compendium. You don't need to write anything for the HKX if you are using WitchyBND for packing. Now, let's pack up the AniBND file. Now we need to edit the XML for the Death Poker to register all the new files. To save time, I will show you one that works, and again, the important things are the IDs. The ID for the texture file is always 100. The ID for the first model is always 200. The ID for the second model is always 201. If it is the third model, then it would be 202. The ID for the collidable is always 800. If there is a collidable in this weapon, the ID for the AniBND file for the first model is always 400. Here it is 401 since it is for the second model. The ID for the CLM2 file for the first model is always 700. Here it is 701 since it is for the second model. The ID for the cloth physics HKX file for the first model is always 900. Here it is 901 because it is for the second model. If the IDs are wrong, the mod won't work. Now, let's repack the Death Poker. Now let's go to Elden Ring and have a look. We are now in Elden Ring, and let me equip the Death Poker. Now if I rotate the camera, we can see that the model of the bird is in, but it is at a funny place. This is normal because we are yet to edit the dummy polies. Now let's move around to check the model. We can see that the cloth physics, the textures and flowing material effect are all working. If you can replicate this, then step 1 is successful. What we need to do next is to edit the dummy polys and move the wings to the back of the player.
Now, let's discuss step 2, which is for dummy poly processing. You can consider a dummy poly as a space vector that has 3 fundamental properties. Position is where it starts. Forward is where it ends. Upward decides its orientation. For upward, we can take the aircraft principal axes as an analogy. Similar to an aircraft, which has yaw, pitch, and roll axes to decide its spatial orientation, we can control the orientation of a dummy poly by adjusting its x, y, z in upward. Note that upwards x, y, z appear in radian, instead of degree in Filver Editor. The reference ID is what you are going to put into the regulation.bin file. The parent bone is not really important, while the attach bone is important. It is the bone that the NPC is going to follow. For wings, you can use something like Spine 2 or Spine 2 mantle. For my promised moth mod, I used the head bone since I found that if I attached it to Spine 2, it would have horizontal movement while walking, and I didn't want that. Flag 1 decides whether to turn on attach bone following. I recommend to always check its box, otherwise the NPC is not going to follow the player when you're doing things like sitting down or crouching. Now, let's start the demo. Note that tweaking the dummy poly settings could be time-consuming, so I will focus on the results, and you can copy them if you want to. Let's go back to our mod folder. You will see that we now have a CHR folder, and in it, the player's file for dummy polies. Let's open the Filver file. Now, you can see a ton of dummy polies here. What we can do here is to either attach our NPC to an existing dummy poly, or create a new dummy poly, and then attach our NPC to it. I have created a few new dummy polies for my own use. Usually, instead of creating from scratch, you would want to duplicate an existing dummy poly and then modify it to suit your purposes. When you select a dummy poly, you can see that it is highlighted in the viewer by a yellow cross. The purplish arrow marks the position of the dummy poly. The green arrow marks its forward. By tweaking the position, forward and upward, we can make sure the NPC is in the right place. I use 909 for my Death Poker mod. Note that the ID must not conflict with Elden Ring's own IDs. These are my settings for dummy poly, 910. I have scaling on my screen, so it only shows 10 for the reference ID. You can copy these settings if you want to. Now, we need to use Smithbox to actually bind the NPC to the dummy poly. We need to create a project in Smithbox for Elden Ring. I have one created here already. Now, go to Param Editor, go to Search, type Equip, and go to Equip Param Weapon. Now, go to the search for rows and type Death, then select the Death Poker. Now, go to the search for fields and type Sheath. Now, go to Web Abos Sir Pos Param and right-click on it. Then select Go to Unnamed Row. Now, we are on row 25, which is actually used by many great swords. What this means is that the changes we make here will affect other great swords, not just the Death Poker. Now, we need to change the dummy polies for Model 1. You can hover over these to see the tooltips for what they are for. Note that you need to make changes on the correct model, and the indexes for the models are 0-based. In here, our NPC, the Deathrite Bird, is the second model, so we need to make changes for Model 1. If it is the third model, then we need to make changes for Model 2. Now, let's bind Model 1 to Dummy Poly 910. Now, press Ctrl S to save the regulation file, and then we can go to Elden Ring to have a look. Now, we can see the wings are lowered and are now behind the player. We can continue to tweak the dummy poly to move the wings until they are attached to the back of the player. Note that when we edit the animation in step 3, it could also affect the position of the wings. To save time, I am going to show you the finished product. which is resized and repositioned. This is the finished product. You see that the wings are much smaller and they are attached to the back of the player. The cloth physics are preserved and the wings are following the player as expected. If you don't want to resize the NPC, then you don't need step 3. You would just need to tweak the dummy poly in Flavor Editor. Here is a useful trick with Smithbox. Usually, to allow changes of the regulation to take effect, you would at least need to end the game and restart it without shutting it down completely. But with Smithbox, we can force a hot reload. To demonstrate, I will first change all 910 to 909, save, and then go to Game, Param Reloader, all params, and then you can see that the wings have moved since their dummy poly has been changed. If we revert back to 910 and hot load the regulation again, things would go back to normal. The last thing to note is that normally you would need a complete relaunch of the game for changes of dummy polies to take effect. If you want to do a hot reload, then you will need DSAS. In DSAS, press F5 and it will force Elden Ring to reload to make the changes for dummy polies to take effect. Don't forget to pack up the CHRBND file first. We are finally at the last step. For this part, we will first use DSAS to downgrade the skeleton and the animation. Then, we will use 3 deciseconds max to import the skeleton and then the animation. Note that the order of importing is important. We will then edit the animation and then export it and pack it back to the Death Poker. We will keep tweaking the animation in 3 deciseconds max until the NPC looks good. Now, let's go to DSAS and load up the Deathrite bird. Note that usually, you want to copy all the needed files to a dedicated folder for modding, and then use DSAS to load them up instead of using the Elden Ring folders to modding animation. But since all we need to do here is to downgrade the skeleton and animation instead of modding them, this doesn't matter. Now, the bird is loaded up. If we go to Scene and tick all the masks, we can see it in full. Now, we can check up the animations on the left. The first one is the idle animation that we will need. There are many others, such as the spawn animation. Now, go to Tools. Click Export Skeleton and Animation. Pick a destination first, and then pick the second type for export, and then select None, and then select the first animation and the skeleton. Then, click Start, Export, and then it's done. Now, let's go back to our mod folder. On the right are the downgraded skeleton and animation. Note that we must not pack the downgraded skeleton back, otherwise Elden Ring will crash. We can edit the downgraded animation back then, pack it back, but not the skeleton. Now, let's edit the animation in 3 deciseconds max. Note that you will need to install all the Havok-related stuff first, otherwise it won't work. Let's go to File, Import, and import our downgraded skeleton first. Make sure you select Disable Scale in the Havok importer. Then, import the animation. Again, make sure to disable scale. If you drag the play bar near the bottom, you can see the animation in action. If you don't want to keep the animation, you can Ctrl A and then delete all the frames. Now you can see the bird won't move. Let me revert that and show you how to delete a particular bone's animation while preserving others. What we can do is to select one single bone, for example, the root bone, and then click Isolate. Now we can see that all other bones are hidden. Now, if we delete all the frames down on the play bar, we will remove all its animation while keeping other bones' animation. Let's go back to resizing the wings. If we select the root bone of the left wing, by adjusting this bone, we can resize the left wing. Let's click on the scale tool and resize the bone in the perspective window. You may want to turn on mirroring so that you resize both wings at the same time. Note that if you resize too much, you could break the cloth physics. Now, let's export the edited animation. Control A to select all bones, and then go to Havoc Content Tools. Select Export. If you have installed the animation filter configuration, make sure to use it. If you haven't, take a look at the settings and replicate them. At the targeted binary, make sure to select the second to last one. Now, pick a destination. Then, click on Run All Configurations. If you see something like 0 errors and 1 warnings, then it's pretty good. Let's go back to our mod folder. And this is our edited animation file. We need to pack it into the death poker. We will need to keep editing the animation and the dummy poly until we're satisfied. To save time, I am just going to show the finished product again. For this mod, I felt that if I made the wings any smaller, the cloth physics would just be too wonky. They could actually be even smaller, but I found the wings to my liking and I stopped. For the death poker, I only kept the cloth physics. All animations were removed. You can, of course, keep the animation, like here that I had kept the flapping wings animation. In theory, I think it is possible to pack multiple NPCs into one single weapon, but I haven't tried yet. What you can do is to equip 2 of this kind of weapons and get a bunch of wings on your character. This is the end of the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.